Hi everyone, welcome to chapter 7, memory. So in this chapter we're going to talk about how memory works, how we process the information, how we get the information back, as well as different types of memory. So the first thing we're going to want to talk about is what is memory. So memory is the process involved in retaining, retrieving, and using information about stimuli, images, events, ideas, and skills after the original information is no longer present. So pretty much memory is being able to recall things afterwards. So what did you have to eat for breakfast? Being able to remember what you ate once you're done eating breakfast. That kind of thing. So with memory, then we talk about information processing. So the information processing approach can be viewed as a processing system. It says that memory can be viewed as a processing system that encodes, stores, and retrieves information. So these three big words, the encode, store, and retrieve, are going to be very important later in this chapter. And so you can think of memory as being comparative to a computer, which you import information with a keyboard. It's then retained on the hard drive, and then you can later recall or retrieve that information by opening files to view them. But of course, if you put too much information on the hard drive, it can kind of lag. It can take a long time to retrieve a file to open it back up. So kind of like it takes a while sometimes to recall certain information when you're trying to remember something. And then also sometimes over time, it gets harder and harder to open a file, and sometimes we just can't open a file. Sometimes there's a bug in it, if you're thinking about that computer analogy, so we can't always open it. Now, like a couple other chapters, I am going to deviate from the textbook a little bit. So in the textbook, we start with talking about encoding, storage, and retrieval. And then we go into kind of these different types of memory. Now I'm going to switch it up, and I'm going to talk about the three main types of memory first, because I just find that a little easier. They're a little shorter, and then we'll get into the steps of memory. Okay, so these are sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. These are three different types of memory. And then we've got the three steps of memory that we're going to talk about later. So just keep that in mind if you are following along in the textbook, that we're going to do things a little out of order. But again, all this information is still in your textbook. So because we're going to talk about these three types of memory first, I'm just going to give a very short overview of the process of memory. So the process of memory is very simple. We have three steps, okay? So remember, this is the information processing approach. So we've got encoding. So encoding is the very first step in the step of memory. And that's translating information into a neural code so that it can be stored for later use. In other words, it's just getting the information into your head. That's all it is. So that could be like when you hear a song, then the encoding is taking, it's like taking the sensory information and putting it into your head, right? Because then you can process the sound, but you're just encoding it. So it's just getting everything in your head. So think of that as like typing on a keyboard. You're entering information into the computer. Now the next step, step 2, is called storage. So this is the process by which information is retained over time. In other words, it's the way that we take all this information we encoded and we save it. Okay, so it's how we save things. So storage is like saving. Okay, so if with encoding, we're typing everything on the keyboard, we're entering it into, say, a Word doc on your computer. Storage is you're going to hit save. You're going to save it somewhere, right? You might put it in a certain folder on your computer, but you're going to save it. And then retrieval is the third and final step. So retrieval is pulling the information back out of your mind for use. So retrieval is, again, maybe you go away for a couple days and then you're going to come back and you're going to open up that file, that Word doc, out of that storage where you saved it, and you're going to open it back up again. With retrieval, then you can also think of this as right now, you guys are encoding all this information. You're listening to me. You're listening to me talk about all this. So you're encoding everything I'm saying. Now, what you're going to do is, as you're encoding new information, then the old information is being put away in storage. During the test, during the final exam, you guys are going to retrieve that information so that you can answer the questions. Okay, so encoding is kind of like learning, storage is maintaining that learning, and retrieval is using that information you stored. So here we are kind of incorporating the three processes of memory with the three-component model. So the three-component model is what says that there's three types of memory. So again, that's sensory memory, short-term memory, also called working memory, and then long-term memory, okay? So if we look at this fun diagram, this is how we're kind of including our three components models with our three processes of memory. So we've got, there's a sensory input, and there's a sensory registers, right? And then you encode that information. That's the first one. And then we've got our working memory or short-term memory. So that's what we're using right now. And then from our working memory, information will be encoded, right? So we've got encoding, and then from encoding it goes, this should actually say storage. Okay, so we've got the long-term memory now. So long-term memory will stick in the storage area until it's needed, and then it gets retrieved. So we've got retrieval, and it'll move back to working memory. So pretty much we've got our sensory registers, we've got our working memory, which is the memory we're using right now, and then we've got long-term memory that sits in storage until it's needed, and then it's retrieved and turns back into short-term or working memory because we're using it. So you can see how it's kind of a back and forth kind of thing here. Now, this might not make total sense right now, but it will in a little bit as we talk about these three steps more specifically.